Today, we're breaking down the 10 most reliable vehicle manufacturers, plus some of the specific recalls and catastrophic failures that these brands are incurring. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. Starting from the worst and making our way to the best, number 10 slot goes to Kia. Consumers Reports ranks it about 49. And if you're looking at some of the best Kias, you're probably going to shop for a Kia Carnival Hybrid. Kia's got that vehicle down packed and very few customers are complaining about issues. However, Kia's got more than their share of troubles. Kia has recall numbers of 946,346 vehicles. And the fortunate reality is they've actually down from 1.2 million a year before. One of the biggest recalls has to do with the K5, running from model years 2021 to 2024 with 250,000 vehicles recalled sadly, and it had to do with a fuel problem. Allegedly, a check valve installed to reduce the amount of air that goes back into the fuel tank wasn't functioning properly and would allow an overpressurization and a possibility of a fire. Yikes. And on top of it, we know Kia is still trying to lick their wounds from some of the problems with the Theta 2 engines, the catastrophic engine failures, piston rings that are cracked, fuel issues, as well as the ABS controller that would allow some of the brake fluid inside and sadly potentially a risk for fire. The next manufacturer that surprisingly enough to me is Tesla. Yeah, Tesla quite often was further down the list, but they've dropped a bunch of recalls, they've sorted some problems, and now we're finding some of the most reliable and best vehicles in their arsenal are the Tesla Model 3 and the Model Y. They're new, they're revised, but they're also a simpler platform than the bigger brothers, the Model S and the Model X, which have a lot more complexities related to suspensions, electronics, more power output, and clearly just more features means more problems. Why don't we talk about some of the typical recalls, failures, power steering issues that we've seen? And Tesla, with a 745,075 vehicles recalled this year, means they're not out of the woods. They've had their host of issues, backup camera issues, potentially circuit boards that could short out. Approximately 239,000 vehicles are recalled because of backup camera issues. Power steering troubles are recalled to the tune of 376,000 Tesla Model 3s. And of course the Model Ys. But there's also been recalls for Teslas related to hood latch issues. A while back, we also had steering wheels that could potentially come off, and the over-the-air updates always leave people scratching their head. Unfortunately, those aren't the worst. The worst actually lies on the plate of some of the more premium vehicles. The Falcon doors on the Tesla Model X, there have always been a little bit of a trouble. All kinds of issues with the center screen. I actually had a vehicle on loan a couple of years ago, and I had a screen that blanked out on me. It just went black. I could not even move the vehicle. It was gone. Body panel gaps, paint-related issues, fog in the headlights and taillights. You name it, complaints every which way from Sunday. But even the Tesla Cybertruck is posed as the worst vehicle, the least reliable vehicle, and probably the hardest appreciating vehicle in the Tesla model lineups. And of course, a lot of that has to do with sheet metal coming off, some of the panels coming apart, issues with people potentially getting trapped inside, and in worst case, during a fire condition. There has been no shortage of problems. Depreciation's hit them extremely hard, and there's thousands of these vehicles sitting on vacant lots waiting to be sold, and nobody's buying that Tesla Cybertruck. The next vehicle on this list happens to be a domestic product. We're talking about Buick. Now, Buick, the gray-haired special, unfortunately isn't selling all that well, but it doesn't mean it's the most problematic vehicle. CR ranks it as 51, so it's certainly not the worst. They don't have a whole ton of problematic vehicles. As a matter of fact, you don't see of any major issues. There are some consistencies with some of the electronics, some of the infotainment systems, transmissions from time to time, and there have been occasional issues with some of the smaller engines, the Turbo 3s, but largely Buick isn't that unreliable. If you're looking for the most reliable vehicle that seems to have the least complaints is the Buick Envision. I don't really envision myself driving one of those. The next one on the list, I absolutely advocate for. I love the product. I love the fact that you can still get a naturally aspirated V6 engine in some of their vehicles. There aren't many of those around anymore. And we're talking about Acura. I love the brand. I think it's understated. People aren't buying them, but guess what? It's a hidden gem, and you might want to consider buying one. So according to Consumers Reports, they rank them at a 54 in terms of overall reliability for 2026. Some of the worst vehicles are those with the V6. The vehicles like the MDX, and unfortunately that all transfers over to Honda as well with the Pilot and the Honda Ridgeline and some of the other Hondas that use that same V6 like the Odyssey. Sadly, it has to do with a small batch of vehicles that had some crankshaft issues. So there were allegedly some engine problems with Hondas. Consumer Reports ranks a lot of these vehicles highly. As a matter of fact, the Acura Integra are considered to be one one of the most reliable vehicles. The Integra comes with either a 2-liter turbo 4 with a manual gearbox you can get in the Type R. Beautiful. That's what I would buy. And you can also get the base Integra. You can get a manual or a CVT, but we know CVTs aren't the best, so that one I would steer away from. Unfortunately, the base Integra also has that 1.5-liter turbo 4, and we know they've had the oil and fuel dilution issues. Yet outside of that, you've got yourself a vehicle that is very fun, very cute and fresh. Unfortunately, they've given up most of their cars, and really the Integra is one of the few left. The rest are typically SUVs. The next brand, it's a little surprising because of the obvious quality issues that we've heard about some of the CVT transmissions related to Jatco's supplier. Unfortunately, we're dealing with Nissan, but Nissan, according to Consumer Reports, actually ranks fairly well with a rating of 57. The most reliable vehicle you're probably going to find from Nissan comes down to its simplicity. The Nissan Kicks. CVT transmission, small engines, yes, to all of that. Check all those boxes. It doesn't have enough power to get out of its own way. It doesn't overstress the engine, and it certainly doesn't overstrain that transmission. It's a simple vehicle with little technology and is actually considered one of the more reliable vehicles in Nissan space. I personally like the Nissan Frontier. It has an internally mounted water pump, which has had known issues, and sadly it's chain driven. It takes a little bit of work to get it out. It's a little bit labor intensive. Get around that. The Nissan Frontier is one of the best trucks in the fact that it's naturally aspirated. 3.8 liters, V6, no CVTs, it's a torque converter auto, and guess what? No turbos. One of the last of a dying breed. I love the Frontier. Sadly, the Titan went bye-bye a couple of years ago, so this is all we've got. But the bottom of the barrel for reliability goes with anything typically with variable compression engines. The Muranos and the Rogues are all vehicles that I would rank quite lowly. As a matter of fact, there's been a recall recently of close to 500,000 vehicles that seem to have problems with those VC or variable compression engines. CVT transmissions also have been a problem. So whatever you're looking at a Nissan, try to steer away from that. There's not many vehicles that give you a torque converter auto unless you go with the larger trucks. And coincidentally, because of the added technology, that's where we've had some of the issues. BMW, according to Consumer Reports, ranks at a 58 score, which puts it well above the mass majority of its competition. And recalls related to even starter motors that can corrode and ignite, but they've also had issues with water ingress through the windshield on the X5s, the X7s. Could have an issue with the passenger airbag not actually deploying it properly. Or the 4 Series, the M4 or the 430 having an issue with the battery cables not properly connected. So even with BMW having 508,000 vehicles recalled, they've still done a lot better. Their 4-cylinder turbos, the B48s, their 6-cylinder engines called the B58s are vastly more reliable than they've ever been. As a matter of fact, there's some reports that show BMW even more reliable than modern Hondas and Toyotas. Hey, you heard it here. Wait and see, but that's actually going on. BMW is getting much more reliable than they've ever been. Thanks so much for all the new members supporting the channel. If you want your own emoji, priority questions, and sneak peek of a new video, or you just want to support the channel, be sure to hit down there, hit that link. That's going to do all the work for you. Thanks again so much, everybody. And the next manufacturer is slightly sliding off its A game. We're talking about Honda. And Honda's CR ratings is as high as 59, which is still one of the most legendary in the entire industry. The sad part is they've been slipping. There's been a host of issues. As a matter of fact, 1.5 million vehicles are recalled currently for 2026, with as many as 21 different issues, ranging from problems with programming and fueling cutting off, catastrophic engine failures in the 3.5s, wheels not fitted properly with the right lug nuts on the 18-inch rims. On Civics, we're finding that there's a problem there as well. There's a host of challenges that Honda's been dealing with, including the outstanding 1.5-liter oil and fuel dilution challenges. Honda has had its hands full, but with a score of 59, they're still one of the best. The Honda Passport's actually ranked as one of the most reliable models. That's one of the few Hondas I would personally buy. Sadly to say, some of the worst ones are the MDX and the Honda Pilot, which is interesting because they share largely the same platform, minus the transmission that you're finding in the Passport. It's a small batch of issues related to that 3.5-liter V6 engine, but get around that. It's an old school engine, naturally aspirated, 270, 280 horsepower, made it up to a 9-speed or a 10-speed auto depending on the model, and you've got yourself a legend. Stay away from CVTs. Go with a manual. Go with a torque converter auto. Stick with the naturally aspirated V6s if you can. If you want to go turbos, sure. Go with the 2-liter turbocharged engine. Those are the best combinations, but Honda still actually knows how to build a car. The next vehicle comes down to the Lexus IS. I love the IS, not just because of the way it looks. It's a rear-wheel drive, turbo 4-cylinder engine, or a V6. Not just because it even has a V8 or it's just spectacularly handsome. No, it's actually reliable. V8's 472 252 horse V6, you get 311 horsepower, or even a turbo 4, rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. Depends on your flavor, you can get it all, but you can also get reliability. Even their V6 comes with 2 fuel injection systems. Direct injection, but to eliminate the carbon fouling, you also get a port fuel injection. Who thinks of that stuff? Well, Lexus does. And that's why the IS is one of my favorites. One of the worst ones, of course, is the GX550 now and the LX600. Sadly, are both parts of major recalls. There's been as many as 126,000 vehicles recalled currently between Toyota and Lexus, and those 2 Lexus models are on the recall list for bad engines. Those 3.4-liter V6s, I would personally skip them. The rest of the Lexus brand, definitely a reliable option. And a CR score of 60 means you can't go wrong buying a new Lexus in 2026. Let's take a look at the second best brand, and we're talking about, according to Consumer Reports, Subaru now at a rating of 63. There have been some issues. They're not perfect. We know they've got oil leak potential issues with some of their flat fours. They've got windshield problems, fragility. Apparently, their eyesight program has had issues. And unfortunately, a lot of their CVTs have had challenges. As a matter of fact, they overstrain themselves, they tear themselves apart, and until they have a reprogram, they've been known to cut their lives short. Sadly, Subaru's had their issues. EV technology hasn't been that dialed in. A lot of the wind noise that seems to come through the cabin does imply poor quality or lower level engineering. And the Solterra has had a whole list of recall action. On one hand, if you want the most reliable all-wheel drive system, you go to Subaru or Audi. On the other hand, for max reliability, brands like Subaru, even though they're not perfect, they do inspire. And many of these vehicles are known to run 250, 300,000 miles. You've got to keep an eye out. Oil leaks, coolant leaks, and there have been head gasket problems in some older generational WRX and STI drivetrains. Get around that, stick with one of the older cars with a manual gearbox, you're good. But if you're looking for a new vehicle, unfortunately your choices are fewer and far between. Just know that the EV tech is a little outdated, the CVTs are a little bit crude, and overall the technology is a little bit dated as well. If you're just looking for a basic mode of transportation, the cost is there, it's a price point, and the reliability is enough. So proof that just because you're number one doesn't mean you're perfect, because the number one slot still has as many as 3.2 million outstanding recalls spread out over 15 types of different unique issues. There's almost a million vehicles that were recalled for backup cameras that could black out, 600,000 instrument panels that would fail, 440,000 Tundra backup lights that could fill up with condensation, fill up with water, and then short out and stop working. Seatbelt problems, detached wheels, but of course the most important problem that we hear about so much are 126,000 vehicles, Toyota as well as Lexus, related to some of these catastrophic V35A V6 engines that we're hearing all over the place. The Tundra is one of the worst hit, afflicted from 2022 and up. We're hearing left, right, and center. It's all over the forums, people complaining that trucks with as little as 1,000 miles, 5,000 miles, all failing. They start developing a knock, a weird, strange noise, smoke, check engine light. Next thing you know, they're in getting their engine replaced by the local Toyota dealer. That's right, Toyota is the number one slot. They're great, they're not perfect. But according to Consumers Reports, Toyota's ranked at 66, vastly better than the vast majority of the market. The worst goes to the electric vehicle of the Toyota, the only vehicle that they've gone pure EV with, and that's the BZ4X, which had an earlier on wheel loosening type of recall. Very sad, very troublesome, but also the technology's still not there to compete with some of the best in the industry. The best model you can find from Toyota today is the Toyota 4Runner. Yes, it's built in Japan. No, it doesn't have the V6 engine anymore. Yes, it does have that 2.4-liter turbo 4, but so far things are looking up, and the 4Runner being built in Japan just seems to have that edge up on a lot of their products that they built over on North American soil. The Toyota brand, definitely number one slot according to Consumer Reports. I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. If any of these are a question to you, if you agree with any of them, if you don't agree with them, please do drop a line. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But if you want to see the best Toyotas I would buy, or you want to see the only Hondas I would buy, right there. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. See you then. Bye-bye.